Okay, you are back with comedian David Boyle, and I'm quitting alcohol. My kid went through an Australian Rite of Passage today. He survived his first dodgy haircut from an overconfident dad. I cannot believe how much I fucked up this haircut. It's beyond me. The only thing that surprises me more than how bad this haircut was is how confident I was giving it. I swear to God, I was looking through magazines looking for hairstyles. That's how confident I was. I was literally walking around today thinking, why do they even do apprenticeships for hairdressers? Do you really need a 4-year apprenticeship to cut some fucking hair, do you? This is while I was walking around before I'd cut a fucking strand of hair. I had a game plan. I was going to do like a fade. He has like long moppy hair at the moment. So I was going to give him a fade. Start the fade at like 0, then 1, 2, 3. Up the top, leave it a bit hairy. Give him a little bit of a fringe. I had it all planned out. Then this afternoon, I went to get all the different attachments for my shaver, and I couldn't find them anywhere. All I had was number 2, which I used for my beard, and number 1, which I used for my balls. And that didn't bother me either. I was like, I'll just keep a steady hand. I'll keep an eye on length. I've got a pretty good eye. I'll be able to tell. I might layer it as well. I might take a little bit shorter underneath and leave it a little bit longer on top. Let it flop down nicely. So I sit him in the bath, in his chair in the bath, in the freezing cold bathroom. I wrapped him in a towel. I've got the scissors which I recently cut chili with, and I got my ball shaver. And he's looking at me. He doesn't really know that much of what's going on. But the look in his eye told me he wasn't 100% confident with my ability. So I dive into this haircut. I can't reach around to the back of his head because he's facing me and there's a fucking wall behind him. I keep his hair dry and I'm like, I'll go with the shaver first. I'll get it down a little bit. And I put the shaver on his head and nothing seems to be happening because I'm not pressing it against his skull because it's too fucking short. I'm trying to cut his hair in number 4 or 5 with a number 2 attachment. So I'm about a fucking inch off his skull, trying to hand shave it. And the thing is, which I worked out pretty quickly, unless you have leverage on the skull, the hair doesn't fucking chop. So I'm trying to chop it. Shit's flying everywhere. Chunks are coming out. Then I'm like, all right, put the shaver down for a second. Relax. Take a deep breath. This isn't going to plan. My wife's in the background screaming at me. I'm like, shut up. I know how to fucking cut hair. She's like, if I knew you were this fucking bad, I would have done it myself. I'm like, hey, wait till you see the fucking finished product before you comment. So I get the scissors with chili all over them. And his fringe was hanging down into his eyes. So I'm like, I've got to get rid of that fringe. And I just cut it directly across, just straight across. I didn't think about it too much. I just went straight across. And it was just a bowl cut. It was a bowl cut without a fucking bowl. So I'm like, I can't keep it fucking straight. That looks ridiculous. He looks like fucking Paul McCartney singing Love, Love Me Do. You know, I want you, or something. So I'm like, I'm going to have to get a little bit of angle on this fringe. So I just start chopping it on angles, taking more chunks out. Then I sort of just left my body. I was up above myself, watching myself cut this fucking hair. I went back to the shaver. so fucking retarded. I went back to the shaver and I just started shaving randomly with no reason, with no aim, no thought. I just started shaving. Chunks were flying out the back. It still wasn't cutting properly because I wasn't pressing it against his skull. So I took the number 2 connector off and just went fucking 0. I just went raw blade. And then for some reason I cut off one of his sideburns. I cut off one of his sideburns to 0. And I was looking at it and I'm like, did I just do that? My wife is fucking yelling, screaming in the background because she wanted him to have a nice haircut for when the next baby is born, for when we take photos. Well, those plans are out the fucking window now because he's got one fucking sideburn. He's got chunks taken out. He's got a bowl cut. It's like a chipped bowl cut, uneven and just fucked. The shaved sideburn reminds me of The Simpsons. Remember when Mr. Burns was telling Don Mattingly to shave his sideburns, and then in the end he comes back with both his sideburns completely shaved off, and Mr. Burns is like, I told you to shave your sideburns. Fuck, The Simpsons were good back in the day. But it reminds me of that. Just fucking shaved to the top of his ear. The other side's fine. I just cannot believe the discrepancy in my confidence and my ability on that haircut. I knew I was a shit hairdresser too. Last time I cut anyone's hair, it was another fucking disaster. It was when I was about 16. I was hanging out with this guy, Michael Green, and he was like the cool dude. Tough guy, whatever. He was a big fucking pothead drug taker. And he had this long fringe from back in the 90s. Like it started short at the back of his head and then went long down to like his chin. A real gay fucking fringe. Anyway, we're out one day getting high and he's like, I need a haircut. I'm like, I can cut hair. For no reason. I don't know why I said it back then. I don't know why I did it now. It's like I think I'm in the Matrix or something and I can just download skills at will. I can just believe them into existence. So Greeny's like, all right, come back to my house and we'll smoke some weed and you can give me a haircut. The weed was not a good idea. So we get back to his house and his place was a fucking dump. Like trailer trash, pit bulls in there chewing on the couch. Just a poor person's house. And he had this shed out the back where everyone used to smoke weed. And all the windows had been smashed out. It was covered in graffiti, his practice graffiti. I don't know what his tag was, probably Greeny. You just felt dirty in there. So we're out the back, and Greeny always had the best weed too. The strongest fucking weed. So we're smoking bongs, and I am beyond fucking high. I can barely hold my head up. It was in that transition period where I was trying to quit weed, and it was fucking me up. And I'm sitting in the chair. I can barely even think. And then Greeny's like, so Boyle, you ready to cut my hair? I'm like, yeah. In my head, I was like, what the fuck? He still wants me to cut his hair. Is this guy insane? Can't he tell I'm drooling in the corner over here? I'm like, yeah, where are those scissors? Are they sharp? I'm fucking great at cutting hair. There was a couple of other mates there too, Grant and Ryan. So someone brings out the scissors and Greeny's like, you do know what you're doing, don't you? I'm like, yeah, man, for sure. And this is when hair was important. You're in fucking high school. You're trying to get a little bit of tail. You need a good do. You've got nothing else going for you. You're covered in pimples. You're wearing a Halle Hansen jacket and some FUBU pants. You need a good fucking hairstyle. I'm like, yes, I know how to cut hair. Of course. Whose hair have you cut before? Don't worry about it. Let's not go into details. All you need to know is I did 3 years of my apprenticeship. And I just remember this. I remember I grabbed the scissors and I look around and it really feels like I'm in a crack house tip. And then Greeny goes, you better not fuck this up, Boyle. And then I look down at his head and I'm like, I am so fucking high right now. It looks like his hair is going in all different angles. Should they all be going in one direction? What do I do with this hair? And I'm like, fuck it, I'll just take a snip. I don't know, I'll start with a snip. I'll just cut some hair. That's what I'll do. I'll cut some hair. I'll try and get it on the angle. The angle his hair's already running. I'll just take it up a centimeter and I'll just cut it on that angle. And that's not how hair cutting works. I don't think. I've only cut 2 heads now and I've fucked them both. So I'm cutting Greeny's hair and the angle I cut it on was almost a perfect bowl cut again. I'm like, I swear to God, I had the scissors on an angle. So I try and fix it up. The more I fix it up, the more I'm fucking it up. The angle's completely gone. I'm taking about 2 inches off his stupid fucking fringe that he adored. And then I'm like, hold on. And I go around the front. I'm like, oh, I need to even up the other side. So I went around to the other side. Fuck that side as well. Grant and Ryan were watching it. But they were watching it as though I was doing a good job. I remember looking back at them and they were nodding impressed. Thank God they were high as fuck as well. So I just kept on cutting. I'm like, it looks good shorter down the front. You don't want it that long. I ended up completely fucking his hair, but no one noticed. Got to the point where if I kept on snipping, he would have had to have shaved his head. And I stopped and I'm like, all right, I'm done. Looks pretty good, I reckon. Then Greeny asked Ryan and Grant. They're like, how does it look? They're like, looks good, man. For some reason, I don't know. I don't know why, because it didn't. But Greeny ended up being happy with it and I ended up getting even more stoned and paranoid and fucked up and just wanted to get out of that fucking dirty shed. But that was the last time I had cut hair before today. Like a 20-year gap. And I thought my skills may have improved and they certainly have fucking not. And I'm sober today. All I keep saying is it'll grow back in fucking 2 weeks. We're in lockdown. No one's even going to see it. Just put a fucking beanie on his head. Lucky he's young and we're in lockdown because my dad cut my hair when I was about 7 and completely fucked it. Worse than this, he had to shave it. And not with a fucking luxurious ball shaver. He tried to cut my hair with one of those brushes, a 1990s brush comb with a razor blade in it. I don't even know what the fuck it was. It was a white comb with a razor blade in it. I assume people just use them to shank people. So he's combing my hair with a razor blade in it, and it's just falling out fucking everywhere. He's slicing in. For starters, he doesn't know how to cut hair. And secondly, he doesn't even know how to comb hair because he's a bald cunt. So my hair, my golden, luxurious fucking hair, is just falling out everywhere. And then it got to a point where he just had to shave it. And there was no electric shaver in the Boyle household. That was shaved. I cried for about 4 days. I didn't stop crying for 4 days. These are the things that make you a man. It's a rite of passage. All right. Send us in a fucked up Friday story this week. Send it into my social media. I'm Boyle Comedy on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. If you're enjoying the podcast, share it with your friends, and I'll see you the fuck later.